The call of the Hogs can be heard all the way to San Francisco.
You're listening to Pod at the Palace with Curtis Wilkerson on Inside Arkansas.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome into the show. Curtis Wilkerson here with Inside Arkansas on the Pod at the Palace. Talk some Razorback hoops, sort of, or at least maybe what Razorback hoops will look like in the future, or what people hope it will look like in the future. That's what we're doing. Arkansas has got their midweek bye before they go to Lexington, play Kentucky on Saturday. So for the next couple days here, we're turning the page to next season. Have a couple things lined up for you. Now, does that mean I'm throwing in the towel for this year? Well, the team already kind of did that for me. And so have most of you, because why wouldn't you? A couple weeks ago, we were really bullish on here, just saying, look, Arkansas needs to go 4-0 in this 4-game stretch, 3-1 at a minimum. They went 1-3. They're 15th in a 16-team SEC. They're 58th in the net. They're 12-8 overall. They're 1-6 in the SEC at this point. Arkansas cannot beat the teams that they are supposed to. They're not winning most of their toss-up games. Their only path to the bubble even is beating teams that they aren't supposed to beat. So we're going to preview, cover the games. Obviously, that's not going to change. But until they give us a reason, we aren't wasting any of our time with the March Madness talk or just recycling the same bits over and over and over about their dysfunction. We all get it. We all know what it is. They can't shoot. They're not deep enough. Too many guys that they were counting on are bust. We get it. All right. Torvik has their tourney odds down at 4.4% at this point. It's bad basketball. And all the discussion about it, all it does is leads to more nonstop negativity and insults and vitriol and arguments. You don't want to hear about it, and I don't want to talk about it right now. So we're moving ahead. Greener pastures, we hope. I think we can all agree John Calipari is going to have to do a complete 180 when it comes to his roster building, because this has been pretty much a failed experiment about every way that you can spin it, unfortunately. Now, tomorrow, we're going to do a deep dive on some of his portal patterns of the past, get really specific about what that's looked like for him, what's worked, what hasn't, and maybe get an idea of what that's going to look like in terms of specific portal needs and how they might attack this offseason. But before you do that, it's kind of important to know what you already have in the cupboard, right? Right now, that's Darius Acuff, Malik Thomas, Isaiah Sealy coming in the freshman class, and then plus whoever returns from this current roster, right? Now, in those three freshmen, what I see is you got two big-time guards who are going to play a lot of minutes for you, and you got a wing who I believe can play his way into your rotation. I think Sealy's good, but I think Arkansas needs to have a roster that is deep enough to where he has to play his way into the rotation. You have to play over some guys to get there. That's the type of depth that Arkansas has got to restore, and hopefully Cal's willing to do that. But who's going to come back? I think that's a really important question because it dictates Arkansas's portal pursuits, right? So much by way of what they target, the NIL that they have to use, and then who would be attracted to come into play here based on what you have at certain positions. It's easy to say, oh yeah, they need to go out and get this guy and that guy in the portal. But what's the fit look like? What do the minutes look like? It's all important. So we'll kind of roll through it here. I guess for starters, let's go ahead and point out the obvious. John L. Davis and Jonas Adu are both out of eligibility, right? It's like the two least popular men in the natural state, or at least with the basketball fan base right now. They're out of here. It's so unfortunate how that's gone. I know as frustrated as folks are with their viewing experience, I'm sure their personal experience has been equally miserable here for their last year at college basketball. But hey, at least they've been well compensated. It's just unfortunate the way that it is has worked out there with those guys, but they're gone. So the next question is, who are your draft declarers, right? Well, it's not your typical John Calipari team. And that's a loaded statement. It's not typical in terms of just winning basketball games in the regular season. It's also not in terms of surefire NBA talent, which we knew that going into it. I think the first mailbag I did when we started doing this every day was about who is Cal's next lottery pick, or who's his first lottery pick at Arkansas. that was the question posed, and I recorded it, and I basically said, I don't know that they have one on this team. Now, do they have guys who can get drafted? Sure. But it's a little bit different than what you typically see from a Cal team. I think we went into this thinking that this would probably be his least talented team at Arkansas. We'll see if that's the case. But at any rate, you're still going to have guys who go pro, right? A really good read that I found over at Hoops Hype, and this is a few days ago, so not brand new, but still relatively recent here. I think it was on like the 20th, 21st. So within the last week, they basically took an aggregate of all the most reputable mock drafts for 2025 and put together their own mock draft based on those averages, which I thought was interesting. Good way to put everything in one place. I always appreciate that. I have to do less research when people do that for me. So that was cool. But they have Boogie Fland at 20th and a dude Thero at 23rd. And that's it. Nobody else in the top 60. Like, they went the full 2 rounds. That doesn't mean other guys won't declare or can't get drafted or start their pro career or whatever. But we won't really know about that until we get a little bit further down the road, right? So with these 2 guys, like, I hear a lot of conversation. It's chicken or egg with Boogie, right? Like, does the injury impact his already, kind of dropping, not crazy drop off, but dropping stock, or does it save it, right? Because he won't be exposed further. People can think whatever they want to about that. I don't know. I don't get paid to make that decision. I would hear an argument that Boogie needs to get stronger. He needs to become more efficient. He needs to get better at finishing around the basket. All those things are true. I would also point out that there is a G League for a reason, right? I think he's gone. I really do. And the other thing to consider is, in a world where, let's say, he did return, it really wouldn't make much sense at all with your 2 5-star guards coming in who are essentially the same size, same position. Like, how would you even make that work? The answer is you don't have to worry about it. I'd be really, really surprised. Thero, on the other hand, I mean, my goodness, who wouldn't love having him back? He's going to be up there, I feel like, with Justin Smith in terms of like the most popular 1-year Razorbacks in a long, long time. So fun. Such a great dude. Plays so hard. Has really come along. But, a year 3 college basketball player having a massive breakout season and now being late January as a consensus first-round projection, he needs to go. Would love to have him back. He needs to go. By the way, remember, John Calipari is about helping families more so than his program. He knows he can replace players. Chances are he's going to encourage and help both of those guys begin their pro careers. I'd be surprised if that wasn't the case. So I'm going into this operating under the assumption that both of those guys are gone. I think that's fair to do. And if not, then we'll talk about it at the time. Right now, it's all projection, right? What about DJ Wagner, though? Honestly, I think his decision is the single biggest factor for Arkansas basketball next season. I do. And I'm not going to try to influence anybody out there listening to this to feel either type of way about it. But what I will say is I think this can be looked at through 2 very different lenses. Depends on which cup you drink out of, right? On one hand, there's something to be said for, liking the idea of the continuity and the experience aspect, a 3rd-year guard in the SEC. How many of those do you see nowadays? Especially 3rd-year guards who are in their, I say in their same spot, but under the same coaching staff, I guess. There's also something to be said for knowing exactly what you're going to get out of a player. And if you go look at his comps from last year to this year, well, they're eerily similar, almost identical, actually. The flip side, though, is, to that, like, it makes you wonder if this is just who DJ Wagner is. Like, is there another level of upside there, or is he just a pretty solid college guard? And then you have to decide how that, like, what he brings to the table, how that fits the team that you're trying to construct. And that's why I think it's so important, because here's what we know. I think we can take this to the bank. If DJ Wagner's on the team next year, he is starting and he's playing 30-plus minutes per game, period. There's no 6-man DJ. There's no role player DJ. Not going to happen. Didn't happen at Kentucky as a freshman, not happening at Arkansas this year as a sophomore. Why the heck would it change moving forward? I don't think that's going to happen. Is that what you want? Is that what you need? I'm asking you guys that in the audience, but also like that's the questions that Cal and his staff have to answer. Does that pigeonhole your elite freshman coming in here a little bit? I wonder. Does it put you in a situation where your perimeter shooting in the backcourt is a valid concern again? Maybe. So it's something to keep an eye on. Maybe after 2 years, he's just ready to start his clock and see if he can grind his way through a 2-year deal. I don't know that he's a guy who would necessarily get drafted, maybe in the back end of the second round or something. We'll see how the rest of the year goes, but he doesn't necessarily strike me as a guy who would want to hit the portal again. I also don't know that he'd get more NIL if he went somewhere else. So we'll see. Like from a pure roster building standpoint, I see the argument that I just made from both sides. That's why I made it. Okay. I could also sit here and say that it would be best for Arkansas to move on with a fresh face. Right. And I think a lot of people might feel that way. But we would also then have to operate under the assumption that that Cal would identify, land, and properly utilize somebody who would be a better fit. So again, I think it's the most critical offseason decision to watch because it's going to have such a trickle-down effect on everything else you do in terms of putting this thing together, right? Moving down to the wing, I think your top 2 retention priorities, period, in my opinion, it's Carter Knox and Billy Richmond, right? And I know that Cal's known as like the one-and-done guy, right? It's where he made his bacon. But some of his better teams have had those dudes who make the sophomore jump, right? It's what you were hoping for out of DJ, who's shown some flashes of that, but he's pretty much the same player that he was a year ago. But man, it's hard though not to look at Carter and Billy and not think they're going to be improved significantly a year from now. And neither of them strike me as pro ready right now, unless they maybe get some bad advice. I mean, the flashes that we've seen from Knox, like second half Georgia, first half Oklahoma the other night. That's why him being SEC freshman of the year was my bold prediction over the summer. Obviously, that ain't happening. I conceded that back in December. I did an accountability session on myself. But that's why, because I do think there's an all SEC talent in there if he unlocks it, and maybe he was just a year away. I really hope they get him back. I've been encouraged by what we've seen here, and it's nothing but opportunity for him the rest of the season. I hope he takes it and runs with it. I think he'd be a really good player for Arkansas next year. Billy, it's always struck me as a multi-year investment with Billy. So it would be a darn shame not to be able to see it through, right? And then you got to go back to, we think about this roster construction. It's like, why the hell did Cal only get 9 guys? Why? That was such a risk. What was he doing? Well, his biggest stump about having the short roster was not wanting to coach guys all year for them to go somewhere else, right? Not wanting to have guys who wind up not playing and pout and want to leave, and that affects the team. You think that was not and is not part of his message to both of those guys right now? Because in normal circumstances, or like a normally constructed roster, I guess I should say, Billy probably doesn't play much. And there's a very good chance with his struggles early in the year that Carter Knox gets buried before we even get to SEC play. But both of them have gotten valuable opportunities, and I hope that they both come back. I'm not saying that that's like the greatest silver lining in the world of what's going on here this season, but at least you got that, right? And then you got the 2 in the front court, Trevin and Big Z. Personally, I'm of the opinion it'd be nice if you could retain one of the 2. Here's the thing about Trevin. His stats have dipped from last year even. And it wasn't even his best year. But while his stats have dipped, I feel like his draftability or his appeal to NBA teams might have increased. Because now he's showing like a motor and a willingness to do all the little things required of role players at the next level. And that's what he'd be. And he didn't necessarily show that before. He's an older guy, 4 years in his college career, has had these injuries in the past. Like, to me, if he makes it through a fully healthy season here, it would kind of make sense to make your move, right? As opposed to coming back for a 5th year, risking another injury, Of course, he'd have to weigh that against like whatever his NIL package looks like. So that's the other part of the consideration there. But, I think sometimes it's easy to just look at, production or whatever and be like, oh, he's not going pro. Why would he come back? Oh, the reasons for him were a little bit different. His circumstances are a little bit unique. It's about health. It's about the motor. It's about being a good teammate, showing all those things that he is showing now, despite those stats going down. So I wouldn't be surprised if he goes. We'll see. Z, I think, is a guy who has an outside shot at being draftable. I don't think he's, not a first round guy, but later portions of the draft. But I think he's 1 year away from really locking himself into that. You can't deny his skill at this size being so unique, and he is developing. He is. Here's what I'll say about Z, and I'm of a strong opinion here. If I am John Calipari, I am starting Zvonimir, and I'm committing minutes to him every single game the rest of this season. Every game. He'll have his ups and downs. I don't care. Playing him. If he pops off and he catches the eye of scouts and he gets drafted, great. You're achieving your goal. Another family helped. If he continues to improve and develop while you strengthen your commitment and your relationship with him, then you have a good piece to start your front court rebuild with, because you're going to have a lot of work to do there anyway. Having, a guy coming back in his 3rd year with that development, with that potential, and his circumstances are unique as well, that wouldn't be a bad thing, So can you get one of those two back? In the end, like 3 freshmen coming in, a minimum of 2 returners, in my opinion, maximum of 5. I don't think all 5 of them are going to come back. We're talking Carter, Billy, DJ, Z, and Trevin. I don't think you bring all 5 of those guys back. Probably somewhere in between, right? Maybe you wind up with 3, high end 4. So unless John Calipari is completely insane, and he's a lot of things, I don't think he's crazy, that gives you anywhere between 4 to 6 spots in the portal to work with and fill out. And we're going to go super deep into what that might look like in the morning. But I feel like the first thing we need to do is kind of establish where things stand with a lot of these guys on the roster in terms of who might be out of here, who might be coming back, whatever. So appreciate you for tuning into that. Hopefully you'll like it. It's a temporary reprieve from talking about this frustrating basketball season, and we'll get into some portal fun tomorrow. Got some pretty cool stuff, I think, cooked up for that. Based on what Cal has done in the past, what's worked for him, what hasn't. But anyway, I'm going to get out of here. Been Curtis Wilkerson, Inside Arkansas on the Pod at the Palace. We'll catch you guys in the morning as always. Everybody have a good day. Appreciate you.